يا أيها الناس قد جاءتكم موعظة من ربكم وشفاء لما في الصدور وهدى ورحمة للمؤمنين.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام محمد ومن تبعهم بإحسان يوم الدين. So in this lesson here, in this video here, we're going to be speaking about the roots and causes of porn use itself. Okay, so most people get exposed to pornography. If they do get exposed to pornography, it's between the ages of 10 and 14, according to statistics. Nowadays, I wouldn't be surprised if some of it happens even earlier, just due to the nature of these things. That being the case, guys, it's important to understand the different reasons why children get involved into pornography and continue to be involved with pornography. Okay, and when it comes to children or kids, it's usually two main reasons. There's an aspect of learning about sex, right? So without safe conversations at home, school, some kids will turn to pornography to try to find those answers. Even Muslim kids, unfortunately, right? If there isn't some type of discussion on these topics inside the house, then they might try to start seeking answers outside the house. So this is where it becomes important that parents, when kids reach puberty or after maybe a few years after puberty, they do have at least some type of discussion about sex and sexuality and the reproduction system in a general sense. And what's the Islamic view on it, and so on and so forth. If we make something too taboo, people will try to seek a way to learn about that thing. And this is something that scholars of Islam have spoken about. The scholars say that if people were prevented from, opening dung, they would do so, because they say like, we're being prevented from this thing because there's something special about it. Okay. So if we don't have open conversations on these topics, people will try to go to the wrong sources for them. Another major issue is belonging to a group, right? Unfortunately, pornography has been normalized to the extent where if you don't partake in pornography in high school or in a lot of different settings, especially as a young boy, you'll feel left out, and sometimes you'll even be made mock. You'll even be mocked, right? It's unfortunate, but it's the reality. Okay, now that's a bigger issue in terms of changing your friend groups, in terms of whether you should even go to public school, in terms of the options of homeschooling, and how, in a general sense, in my opinion, kids shouldn't be sent to these public schools, and we need to create other systems of education that are safer for kids. But that's a different discussion, right? But these are two different reasons why we find kids get involved into pornography. And if you are involved in pornography, you can maybe find that one of these two reasons, or both of them, were one of the things that unfortunately sort of exposed you to this and then led you down this path. Now, there are other reasons, of course, right? Difficulty with intimacy, right? So as I covered before, real intimacy requires vulnerability, care, effort, and porn bypasses these challenges. So some men, right, even in a marriage, for example, if they're having difficulty with intimacy and their iman's low, they might resort to these types of negative, unhealthy, and haram ways. Likewise, cope with emotional stress. We talked about that before, right? Porn provides escape from stress, bullying, family conflict, or rejection. So children, young boys that are going through these types of scenarios, it's a lot easier to masturbate and watch pornography as a coping mechanism than to go out and smoke weed, right? Smoking weed leaves behind a scent. You need money. You need to go out to actually get it. You need to get all the paraphernalia, right? The blunts and all that stuff, the rolling paper and all that stuff. Pornography, as I've covered before, is something that's on your phone. It's just, a few seconds you can get access to it, and the supply is around you. The supply is in your head. It's the dopamine, it's the adrenaline that you're going to get. Closely linked to the previous one is family dynamics, right? So strict controlling parents can create a culture of guilt and shame that leads to secret porn use for comfort, right? So parents, if they're too strict on their children, again, that can lead their children to rebel. And one of the ways they can rebel is by going to these negative things. Likewise, uninvolved and enabling parents, right, that provide no guidance can also unfortunately lead their children into this horrible path of addiction. Other factors is loneliness and isolation. This is a very big one. People dealing with social anxiety, rejection, general loneliness will try to find some type of connection, and porn can create a false sense of connection. It can create a false sense of connection. And in reality, unfortunately, porn actually deepens isolation, because porn will lead to a culture of secrecy. So now you're going to be even more isolated from your family, even more isolated from your friends that don't know about this. You're going to end up lying, right? And it encourages a relationship with images instead of people, right? And this is why many men, they don't want to get married. Many men, they don't have, they're misogynist against women, because number one, they don't feel the need for a woman because they can release their sexual urges in other ways. And then number two, any exposure that they're getting to women is women being abused, right? Women being sexually abused in these videos and so on and so forth, which leads to a misogynist view of women and sexual interactions in general. And that's another discussion we're going to talk about when we talk about the path of healing. So the reality is isolation and loneliness leads to trying to find a connection. And many men will try to find that connection through this pornography. And that pornography will actually create a deeper sense of depression, a deeper sense of loneliness. Because as we know, as Muslims, right, من جزاء السيئة من عقاب السيئة السيئة بعدها. From the evil consequences of a sin is a sin that follows it. One sin always leads to another. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, do not follow the footsteps of shaitan. So shaitan slowly tries to drag us to our destruction. Childhood sexual abuse, okay, it's a very real thing, right? 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys experience some type of sexual abuse. So if you were sexually abused, whether you're a girl or a boy, you have to understand that, you need to start the process of healing. It's a very difficult process. But early sexual experiences can lead to a fixation on sex. Okay. Likewise, trauma fuels compulsions and addictions. So there's two different things that are playing here. If someone was sexually abused when they're a child, that sexual abuse can leave such a strong mark on them that they feel some type of fixation on sex. Unfortunately, it's not their fault, right? It's because they're sexually abused, but it had such a big imprint on them as a young child. And then likewise, the trauma and the pain that sexual abuse leaves on a child can lead him to a life of addiction. And part of the ways that that person can try to find comfort from their pain is through pornography, unfortunately. This is a very, very, sensitive topic. And if someone did deal with sexual abuse and they feel that sexual abuse has led them to pornography and to, homosexuality, and gay, lesbianism, and so on and so forth, they need to get therapy. Yeah. Cultural normalization. Again, that's something I mentioned before, right? That sexual images saturate modern culture. You can't go on Instagram without seeing something. You can't go on YouTube without seeing something. You can't just go to school or go outside without seeing something. And then likewise, again, pornography is normalized amongst men, right? So you face a huge pressure and sexual frustration, yet are left with little to no healthy guidance and outlets, right? Unfortunately, the Muslim community is making it very difficult for people to get married a lot of times. So then they try to find a way to release this sexual frustration, and the only way that they're able to find, quote unquote, there's other ways that we're going to speak about, but in their mind, shaitan makes them think that the only way that they can release that sexual frustration is through pornography, and then they begin a cycle of addiction, a cycle of pain. And then likewise, the general taboo around pornography only worsens the problem, because now we have a bunch of Muslim kids that are addicted to pornography, but we don't want to talk about it because it's taboo, because it makes people uncomfortable, right? Even using the word porn is something that is very, very taboo. But we have to start speaking about this if we want to address the problem. Okay, so you have to analyze yourself, and you need to ask yourself what factor played into this addiction that you now have, or this problem that you now have, right? And based on you understanding the root cause, it'll be easier for us when we start talking about the path of healing and how to go about solving to the best of our ability those root factors, and then moving forward and healing from this addiction, be it now with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
يا أيها الناس قد جاءتكم موعظة من ربكم وشفاء لما في الصدور وهدى ورحمة للمؤمنين